The amber liquid in my Scotch glass caught the city lights streaming through our penthouse window, creating patterns that reminded me of broken promises. I stood there in my tailored suit, still wearing the armor of another successful day at Morrison Associates, watching my wife Emily giggle into her phone like a teenager with her first crush. My wife is laughing at something, I muttered to myself, swirling the scotch. And unless our cat learned to text dirty messages, it's probably not me. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Emily sat curled on our Italian leather sofa, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulder as she typed furiously with manicured nails that cost more than most people's car payments. She wore the black cocktail dress I'd bought her for our anniversary, the same anniversary she'd forgotten last month. "Who's got you so entertained, sweetheart?" I called out, my voice carrying that particular brand of sarcasm I'd perfected during 15 years of corporate warfare. She looked up, startled, quickly flipping her phone face down. "Oh, just Monica. You know how she gets with her stories about the board meetings." Monica, her boss, the ice queen who ran the acquisitions department like her personal kingdom. Everything was always "Monica said this," or "Monica thinks that." If I didn't know better, I'd think my wife had developed a schoolgirl crush on her supervisor. "Monica's quite the comedian these days," I observed, moving closer to the couch. "She's got you laughing at 10:30 on a Tuesday night. Must be some story." Emily's laugh sounded forced now, brittle around the edges. "You know how work is, Jack. Always something happening." Work, right? The same work that had her coming home at midnight 3 times last week, claiming client emergencies and urgent presentations. The same work that had her showering immediately when she walked through the door, as if she needed to wash something off her skin. I'd noticed other things, too. New jewelry that didn't come from me. Expensive lingerie hidden in the back of her dresser drawer. Lingerie I'd never seen her wear. The way she'd started going to the gym at odd hours, always looking perfectly made up when she returned from her workouts. "How is the lovely Monica, anyway?" I asked, settling into my leather chair across from her. "Still ruling the office with an iron fist?" "She's fine." Emily's response came too quickly. "Actually, she mentioned you the other day. Said she'd like to get to know you better." Interesting. Monica Castellano was a shark in Armani suits, a woman who'd clawed her way to the top of our firm by stepping on anyone foolish enough to get in her way. She was also stunning in that dangerous, predatory way that made smart men stupid and stupid men gone. Did she now? I took another sip of scotch, studying my wife's face. And what brought on this sudden interest in little old me? Emily shrugged, but I caught the tension in her shoulders. She just said she realizes she doesn't know much about my personal life. Thought it might be nice to meet for drinks sometime. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't like. Monica's sudden interest in me, Emily's mysterious phone calls, the way my wife had been treating me like a stranger in my own home. Either Monica was planning some kind of power play at the office, or my wife was playing a game I hadn't figured out yet. "You know what, Emily?" I stood up, straightening my tie. "Maybe I should take Monica up on that offer. Get to know the woman who's been keeping my wife so entertained lately." The color drained from Emily's face. "Jack, I don't think that's necessary, appropriate." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Sweetheart, I think it's exactly what we need. A little transparency in our professional relationships." Emily's phone buzzed against the couch cushion. She grabbed it quickly, but not before I caught a glimpse of the contact name. E. Not Monica. Someone else entirely. "I should probably get some sleep," she said, standing abruptly. "Early meeting tomorrow." "Of course you do." I watched her gather her things, noting how she clutched that phone like a lifeline. "Sweet dreams, darling. Try not to let work keep you up all night." She paused at the doorway to our bedroom, and for a moment I thought she might say something real, something honest. Instead, she just gave me that practiced smile she used with difficult clients. "Good night, Jack." The bedroom door closed with a soft click, leaving me alone with my scotch and my suspicions. I moved back to the window, looking out at the city below. Somewhere out there was the truth about what my wife was really doing, and with whom. I pulled out my own phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I wanted. Sophie Martinez, my business associate and one of the few people in this cesspool of a company I actually trusted. If anyone would know what was really going on in Monica's department, it would be Sophie. The phone rang twice before her familiar voice answered. "Jack, it's kind of late, isn't it?" "Sophie, I need a favor, and I need you to keep it between us." "This sounds serious. What's going on?" I looked toward the closed bedroom door, where my wife was probably texting her mystery contact. I think my marriage is about to become a very public spectacle, and I need to know who's writing the script. Meet me for lunch tomorrow, Sophie said without hesitation. Brennan's at 1 o'clock. And Jack, be careful. The rumor mill has been working overtime lately, and some of the stories I'm hearing, well, let's just say you might not like what I have to tell you. The line went silent, leaving me with more questions than answers. I finished my scotch and headed toward the guest bedroom, where I'd been sleeping more often than not lately. As I passed our bedroom door, I could hear Emily's muffled voice through the wood, speaking in the kind of hushed, intimate tones she used to reserve for me. She thinks I'll play the fool, I whispered to myself, loosening my tie. She has no idea I wrote the book on fools. Tomorrow, I'd start getting answers. And once I knew exactly what game my wife was playing, I'd show her what happened when you underestimated Jack Morrison. The next morning arrived with the kind of gray Seattle drizzle that matched my mood perfectly. Emily had already left for her early meeting by the time I emerged from the guest bedroom, leaving behind only the lingering scent of her expensive perfume and a coffee cup with lipstick stains on the rim. I stood in our kitchen, looking at that cup, and realized I couldn't remember the last time she'd made coffee for both of us. When had we stopped being a team and started being two strangers sharing real estate? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Looking forward to our drink soon. M. Monica. Somehow she'd gotten my personal number, which meant Emily had given it to her. Interesting move, considering how panicked my wife had looked last night when I'd suggested meeting her boss. I typed back, "How about tonight? Skylark Lounge, 7 p.m.? The response came immediately. "Perfect. I'll make sure Emily knows where you'll be." The game was definitely afoot. At Morrison Associates, I went through the motions of being a productive executive. I reviewed contracts, attended meetings, and made the kind of small talk that kept the corporate machine humming. But my mind was elsewhere, cataloging every interaction I'd had with Emily over the past few months, looking for clues I'd missed. The expensive jewelry, the new clothes, the way she'd started working out obsessively, coming home with that particular glow that had nothing to do with exercise equipment. At exactly 1 o'clock, I walked into Brennan's and found Sophie waiting in our usual corner booth. She looked up from her menu with the kind of expression people wear when they're about to deliver bad news. "You look like hell, Jack." "Thanks. You always know exactly what to say to make a man feel better." Sophie Martinez was one of the few people in our industry who'd managed to climb the corporate ladder without sacrificing her soul. She was smart, direct, and had a network of contacts that would make the CIA jealous. "Before you ask me anything," she said, "I need you to promise me something. Whatever I tell you, you're not going to do anything stupid?" Define stupid. Violence. Public scenes. Anything that ends with you in handcuffs or unemployment. I ordered a whiskey, even though it was barely past noon. I promised to keep my stupidity to a minimum. Sophie studied my face for a long moment, then sighed. "Emily's having an affair." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting them. Knowing something and hearing it confirmed were two different kinds of pain. "How long have you known?" "About 6 weeks. I wasn't sure how to tell you, or even if I should, but after your call last night..." She reached across the table and touched my hand. "I'm sorry, Jack. I really am." "Who is it?" "His name is Ethan Cross. He owns that trendy art gallery downtown, the one that hosts all those pretentious wine and cheese events for people with more money than taste." Ethan Cross. I knew the name. He'd been featured in Seattle magazine last year as one of the city's most eligible bachelors. Tall, dark, and handsome in that carefully sculpted way that screamed expensive personal trainer and even more expensive grooming routine. "How did you find out?" Sophie pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. Emily and a man I recognized from the magazine article, sitting at an intimate table in what looked like an expensive restaurant. His hand was covering hers, and she was looking at him the way she used to look at me. "My friend Sarah works at Le Bernardin. She sent me this last Thursday night. Said they seemed very close." Thursday night. The same night Emily had told me she was working late on a presentation for Monica. "There's more," Sophie said gently. "Sarah said they've been coming in regularly for about 2 months. Always the same table, always very affectionate. And Jack, they're not exactly discreet about where they go afterward." The whiskey burned going down, but it was nothing compared to the fire building in my chest. 2 months. My wife had been playing house with another man for 2 months, and I'd been so buried in my own work that I'd barely noticed. "What else do you know about him?" "Rich family, trust fund baby who decided to play at being an art dealer. He's got a reputation as a player, likes to collect beautiful things. Apparently that includes other men's wives." I stared at the photo, memorizing every detail. The way Emily's face was lit up with genuine happiness, the expensive watch on Ethan's wrist, the intimacy between them that spoke of more than just a casual fling. Does Monica know? Sophie's expression darkened. That's where it gets complicated. Monica's been covering for Emily, providing alibis for her late nights, but I don't think she's doing it out of friendship. What do you mean? Monica's been positioning herself for a promotion to the executive board, having leverage over Emily, and by extension, you could be very valuable to her. The pieces were falling into place now. Monica's sudden interest in meeting me, Emily's panic when I'd suggested drinks with her boss, the way my wife had been treating me like a stranger while getting cozy with the woman who held her career in her hands. So Emily's affair gives Monica power over both of us, I said. That's my read on the situation. Monica gets to play puppet master while Emily gets to play house with her art dealer. I finished my whiskey and signaled for another. You know what the funny thing is, Sophie? I actually thought about fighting for my marriage. Thought maybe Emily and I just needed to reconnect, spend more time together. And now? Now I was thinking about Ethan Cross's smug face in that magazine photo, about the way Emily had lied to me every single day for 2 months, about Monica's calculating smile and her sudden desire to get to know me better. Now I'm thinking it's time to remind everyone why they used to call me the most ruthless negotiator in the firm. Sophie looked alarmed. Jack, remember what you promised me. I'm not going to hurt anyone, Sophie, but I'm also not going to sit back and let my wife and her boss make a fool of me. I pulled out my phone and typed a quick message to Monica. Change of plans, meet me at your office at 7. We have a lot to discuss. Then I typed another message, this one to Emily. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Let her think I was buried in contracts and depositions. Let her make plans with her art dealer boyfriend. By the time I was done with tonight's conversation, the balance of power in this little triangle was going to shift dramatically. What are you planning? Sophie asked. I smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it felt genuine. I'm going to give Monica exactly what she wants. A chance to get to know me better? That sounds ominous. Sophie, my dear, you have no idea how ominous I can be when people underestimate me. I left Brennan's with a plan forming in my mind. If Monica wanted to play games with my marriage, I'd show her what happened when she chose the wrong opponent. And if Emily thought she could humiliate me while I stood by and watched, she was about to learn that her husband was full of surprises. The afternoon crawled by with excruciating slowness. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it might be Emily with some explanation, some sign that she was ready to come clean about what she'd been doing. Instead, I got updates from clients, meeting requests, and the usual corporate noise that filled our days. At 6:30, I straightened my tie, I grabbed my briefcase, and headed for the elevator. It was time to have a conversation with Monica Castellano, and by the end of it, she'd understand exactly what kind of man she'd been trying to manipulate. The elevator doors closed, and I caught my reflection in the polished steel. I looked like what I was, a successful executive in an expensive suit. What Monica couldn't see was the rage burning behind my professional facade, or the detailed revenge that was already taking shape in my mind. She thought she was playing chess with a pawn. She was about to discover she'd been playing with a king who was tired of being moved around the board. Monica's office occupied a corner of the 42nd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of Seattle's skyline. She sat behind a glass desk that probably cost more than most people's cars, wearing a red dress that was professional enough for the office, but suggestive enough to remind you she was a woman who knew how to use every weapon in her arsenal. Jack, she said, standing to greet me with a smile that was all teeth and calculation. I have to admit, I was surprised by your message. I thought we were meeting at the Skylark. Plans change. I settled into the chair across from her desk, noting how she'd positioned the lighting to cast shadows that made her look mysterious and powerful. I thought it might be better to have our conversation somewhere more private. How thoughtful of you. She moved to the bar cart in the corner of her office, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Scotch? I remember Emily mentioning you have expensive tastes. Emily talks about me? Monica poured 2 glasses of what looked like 20-year-old single malt. Oh, constantly. She's very concerned about you lately, says you've been distant, distracted. She handed me the scotch and sat back down, crossing her legs in a way that was definitely not accidental. Monica Castellano was beautiful in the way that successful predators were beautiful, perfectly designed to lure prey into striking distance. Distracted by what? Work, apparently. She says you've been putting in long hours, sleeping in the guest bedroom. She's worried your marriage might be in trouble. I took a sip of the scotch. It was excellent, probably worth more per bottle than most people made in a week. And what do you think, Monica? Do you think my marriage is in trouble? Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. I think marriages are complicated things. People grow apart, develop different interests, find themselves attracted to new experiences. New experiences like affairs? If I'd hoped to catch her off guard, I was disappointed. Monica didn't even blink. Are you asking me if I think Emily is having an affair? I'm asking if you know she's having an affair. Monica stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the growing darkness. What would you do if she was? That depends on who knew about it and who helped cover it up. She turned back to face me, and for the first time since I'd entered her office, her expression was completely serious. Jack, I'm going to be very direct with you. Emily is a valuable member of my team, but she's also young and ambitious and occasionally makes poor decisions. If she were involved with someone inappropriate, I'd consider it my responsibility to protect both her career and the reputation of this firm. Even if protecting her meant lying to her husband? Even then. I finished my scotch and set the glass down on her desk with a soft click. You know, Monica, I've always admired your directness. It's refreshing in a business full of people who say one thing and mean another. I sense a but coming. But I think you've made a mistake. You've assumed that I'm the kind of husband who would be devastated by his wife's infidelity, the kind who would fall apart and become a liability to the firm. Monica moved back to her chair, her predator instincts clearly engaged now. And you're not that kind of husband? No, Monica, I'm the kind of husband who gets even. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photograph Sophie had taken that afternoon. Emily and Ethan Cross, walking hand in hand into his downtown loft building. I know about Ethan. I know about the restaurant dates, the hotel visits, the lies Emily's been telling to cover her tracks. What I don't know yet is exactly how you fit into all of this. Monica studied the photo with the same detached interest she might show a quarterly earnings report. What do you want, Jack? I want the truth, all of it. And then I want to discuss what happens next. She was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she poured herself another scotch and settled back in her chair. Emily came to me about 3 months ago. She was frustrated with her career trajectory, felt like she was being overlooked for promotions. She asked if there was anything she could do to accelerate her advancement. And you suggested she sleep with someone? I suggested she expand her networking. Emily took that advice in her own direction. With Ethan Cross. Among others. Ethan was just the one who stuck. The casual way she said it made me freeze. Among others. My wife hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been working her way through Seattle's social scene like it was a professional development opportunity. And you covered for her because it gave you leverage, Monica smiled. I covered for her because her personal life was irrelevant as long as it didn't affect her work. But yes, having an employee who owes me discretion has been useful. Useful enough to risk lying to me. Jack, until tonight, you never asked the right questions. I stood up, straightening my jacket. Monica had confirmed what I'd suspected, but she'd also revealed something more important. She saw Emily as a tool to be used, not a person to be protected. Thank you for your honesty, I said. It's going to make what happens next much easier. And what happens next? I moved toward the door, then paused with my hand on the handle. Next, Monica, you're going to discover that manipulating my wife was the second biggest mistake of your career. What was the first? Thinking you could manipulate me. I left her office with the sound of her laughter following me down the hallway. Let her laugh. By tomorrow morning, she'd understand exactly what kind of war she'd started. The elevator ride down to the parking garage gave me time to think. Emily was at Ethan's loft right now, probably telling him about her paranoid husband and his suspicious questions. Monica was in her office, calculating how to minimize the damage from our conversation. Both women thought they were dealing with a predictable man who would follow predictable patterns. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Sophie. Need that private investigator's number you mentioned last year, tonight. Then I sent another message, this one to Emily. Hope your evening with Monica is productive. See you at home. Let her wonder how much I knew. Let her spend the night worrying about what I might do next. Because starting tomorrow, Emily and her new friends were going to discover that Jack Morrison wasn't the kind of man who disappeared quietly into the background. The parking garage was nearly empty, just a few scattered cars belonging to the workaholics and insomniacs who kept our industry running. I walked to my BMW, noting the way my footsteps echoed off the concrete walls. As I drove through the Seattle streets toward home, I thought about the conversation I'd just had with Monica. She'd been testing me, trying to figure out if I was a threat or just another wounded husband who could be managed and controlled. I'd given her the answer she needed, but probably not the one she'd wanted. My phone rang as I pulled into our building's parking garage. Sophie's name appeared on the display. "That was fast," I said, answering on the second ring. "I figured you'd want to move quickly. His name is David Park, he's discreet, and he's very good at documenting things that people would prefer to keep private. I'm texting you his number now." "Sophie, you're a lifesaver." "Just remember what you promised me, Jack. Whatever you're planning, keep it legal." "Legal?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sophie, by the time I'm done with them, they're going to wish I'd chosen illegal." I ended the call and headed up to our penthouse, where I'd spend the evening planning the systematic destruction of everyone who'd thought they could make a fool of Jack Morrison. The war was just beginning. 3 days later, I sat in my car across from Ethan Cross's art gallery, watching him through the floor-to-ceiling windows as he charmed a group of potential buyers. He moved with the kind of practiced grace that came from a lifetime of having doors opened for him, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. David Park had been worth every penny I'd paid him. The private investigator had provided me with a comprehensive dossier on my wife's lover, complete with financial records, social media activity, and a detailed timeline of his relationship with Emily. The picture that emerged was of a man who collected beautiful things: art, cars, and apparently other men's wives. Ethan had a pattern of targeting married women in positions of power or influence, using his charm and connections to extract both emotional and financial benefits from his conquests. Emily was just his latest acquisition. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Package delivered to your office. Everything you requested." I smiled, starting the engine. Phase 1 of my revenge was about to begin. Back at Morrison Associates, I found the manila envelope waiting on my desk, sealed and marked confidential. Inside were photographs, financial documents, and a USB drive containing video footage that would make Emily's affair impossible to deny. But I wasn't ready to play that card yet. First, I wanted to have a conversation with Ethan Cross. I called the gallery and asked to speak with the owner. Ethan's voice was smooth and cultured when he came on the line, exactly the kind of voice that would appeal to women who thought sophistication was measured in wine knowledge and art appreciation. "Mr. Cross, this is Jack Morrison. I believe you know my wife, Emily." There was a pause, just long enough to confirm that he recognized the name and understood the implications. "I'm not sure Let me be more specific. I'm the husband of the woman you've been sleeping with for the past 2 months. I'd like to meet with you to discuss the situation." Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear him calculating his options. "Mr. Morrison, I think there might be some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding. Just a conversation between 2 men about a woman we both care about. Unless, of course, you don't actually care about Emily and she's just another conquest for you." That hit the target. Ethan's voice took on a defensive edge. "Of course I care about Emily. She's an extraordinary woman." "Then you'll want to meet with me to make sure we handle this situation in a way that protects her reputation. Shall we say tonight at 8? Your gallery?" I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, weighing his options. Finally, he agreed. "Fine, 8 o'clock. But Mr. Morrison, I want you to know that Emily and I never intended for things to develop the way they have." "I'm sure you didn't. See you tonight?" I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for the conversation. By the time I walked into Cross Gallery at exactly 8 o'clock, I had a clear plan for how the evening would unfold. Ethan had closed the gallery to the public, leaving just the 2 of us surrounded by overpriced paintings and pretentious sculptures. He looked nervous, which was exactly how I wanted him. "Mr. Morrison," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." I ignored the handshake. "Let's skip the pleasantries, Ethan. We both know why I'm here." He gestured toward a seating area in the back of the gallery. 2 leather chairs positioned near a piece that looked like someone had thrown paint at a canvas and charged $50,000 for the privilege. "I want you to know that I have tremendous respect for you," he began. "Emily speaks about you often." "Does she?" I settled into the chair across from him, noting how he kept glancing toward the front door as if planning an escape route. "What does she say?" "She says you're brilliant, successful, that you built an incredible career from nothing. And yet she's sleeping with you instead of coming home to me." Ethan flinched as if I'd slapped him. "It's not that simple." "Actually, it is exactly that simple. My wife is having an affair with you, and you're either too naive or too arrogant to understand what that makes you." "What does it make me?" I leaned forward, letting him see the cold calculation in my eyes. "It makes you a problem that needs to be solved." The color drained from his face. "Mr. Morrison, if you're threatening me—" "I'm not threatening you, Ethan. I'm explaining the situation to you. See, you've made the mistake of thinking this is some kind of romantic comedy where the charming young man steals the neglected wife from her workaholic husband. But this isn't a movie, and I'm not going to disappear quietly so you can have your happy ending. I pulled out my phone and showed him one of David's photographs, Emily leaving Ethan's loft at 6 in the morning, her hair disheveled and her makeup smeared. This photo was taken yesterday morning. I have dozens more, along with hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and video footage of the two of you in situations that would be very embarrassing if they became public. Ethan stared at the photo, his hands shaking slightly. What do you want? I want you to understand something very clearly. Emily isn't some single woman you met at a cocktail party. She's my wife, and she's playing a game that's going to destroy her career, her reputation, and quite possibly her freedom if the wrong people find out about it. Her freedom? I smiled, enjoying the confusion on his face. Emily's been using company resources to facilitate your relationship. Company cars, company credit cards, company time. That's called embezzlement, Ethan. It's a felony. It was a bluff, but a convincing one. Ethan's face went white. She never told me. Of course she didn't. Emily's been living in a fantasy where actions don't have consequences. But I live in the real world, where adultery and embezzlement can destroy lives. I stood up, straightening my jacket. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to end your relationship with my wife. Tonight, you're going to tell her that you've realized what you're doing is wrong, and that you can't continue to be the reason her marriage falls apart. And if I don't, then I'll make sure everyone in Seattle's art community knows exactly what kind of man you really are. Your reputation, your business, your trust fund connections, all of it will disappear. And Emily will discover that her romantic adventure has cost her everything she's worked for. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photograph on my phone. Finally, he looked up at me with something that might have been respect. You really love her, don't you? The question caught me off guard. Did I love Emily? Or was this just about winning, about refusing to be made a fool of? I love the woman I married, I said finally. The question is whether that woman still exists, or if she's been replaced by someone I don't recognize. She talks about you, about how distant you've become, how focused on work. And did it occur to either of you that maybe I was distant because I could sense something was wrong? That maybe I was working late because coming home to a wife who was obviously thinking about someone else was too painful to face? Ethan had no answer for that. I headed toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Ethan. If you really care about Emily the way you claim to, you'll do what's best for her. And what's best for her is ending this before it destroys her life completely. I left him sitting in his gallery, surrounded by his expensive art and his expensive guilt. By tomorrow morning, Emily would know that her affair had been discovered, and she'd have to decide whether she wanted to fight for her marriage or continue down the path that would eventually destroy everything she'd worked for. But I wasn't done yet. Monica still thought she was pulling the strings, still believed she could use Emily's affair as leverage against me. It was time to show her exactly how wrong she was. I pulled out my phone and sent her a text. We need to talk. Tomorrow morning, your office, 7 a.m. Then I sent another message to Sophie. Phase 1 complete. Ready to move to Phase 2. The drive home gave me time to think about what came next. Emily would be there when I arrived, probably fresh from her evening with Ethan, ready to lie to my face about where she'd been and what she'd been doing. For the first time in months, I was looking forward to seeing my wife. I arrived home to find Emily pacing in our living room, her phone pressed to her ear. She looked up when I walked in, her face pale and her eyes wide with something that might have been panic. I have to go, she said into the phone, ending the call quickly. Let me guess, I said, loosening my tie. Ethan? The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it, might try to maintain the fiction that had been sustaining us for months. Instead, she surprised me by telling the truth. He told me you went to see him. I did. I poured myself a scotch from the bar cart, noting how Emily watched my every movement like she was afraid I might explode into violence. We had an interesting conversation about respect, consequences, and the difference between love and infatuation. Jack, I can explain. Can you? Because I'd love to hear the explanation for how my wife ended up sleeping with an art dealer while her boss covered for her, and I played the role of the oblivious husband. Emily sank onto the couch, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen, Emily? Walk me through your plan. There was no plan. The words came out as almost a shout, raw with emotion I hadn't heard from her in months. I was frustrated with work, with us, with everything. Monica introduced me to some people in the art community, said it would be good for networking. Ethan was he was charming and attentive, and he made me feel interesting again. And I didn't? She looked at me with eyes that were bright with unshed tears. When was the last time we had a real conversation, Jack? When was the last time you asked me about my day, or my dreams, or anything that wasn't related to work, or schedules, or the practical business of being married? The question hit harder than I'd expected. When had we stopped being lovers and started being roommates? When had I stopped seeing Emily as a woman and started seeing her as just another part of my well-organized life? So you decided to find someone who would pay attention to you. I decided to feel alive again. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. And yes, that was selfish and stupid and wrong. But Jack, we've been strangers for so long that I forgot what it felt like to be wanted. I finished my scotch and set the glass down carefully. And now? Now Ethan says he can't see me anymore because you threatened to destroy his life. And Monica is furious because she thinks I've compromised her position at the firm. And you? She looked at me with something that might have been hope. I don't know what you're thinking. What I was thinking was that my wife looked more beautiful in that moment, with her makeup smeared and her defenses down, than she had in months of careful perfection. What I was thinking was that maybe we were both responsible for the distance that had grown between us. What I was thinking was that it was too late for any of that to matter. I'm thinking that tomorrow morning I'm going to have a conversation with Monica that will change both of your lives significantly. Emily's face went white. What do you mean? I pulled out the manila envelope David had prepared and set it on the coffee table between us. I mean that I know everything, Emily. The hotels, the restaurants, the lies you've been telling. I know about Monica's role in covering for you, and I know about the company resources you've been using to facilitate your affair. Jack, please. I also know that Monica has been using your relationship with Ethan as leverage against me, thinking she could control both of us by controlling information about your affair. Emily stared at the envelope like it contained a bomb. What are you going to do? I stood up, straightening my jacket. I'm going to show Monica what happens when she tries to manipulate someone who's better at the game than she is. And then what? And then, Emily, you're going to have to decide what kind of person you want to be. Because the woman who's been lying to me for 2 months can't stay married to me, and the executive who's been compromising herself for career advancement can't continue working at Morrison Associates. I headed toward the guest bedroom, then paused at the doorway. For what it's worth, I understand why you did it. I understand feeling lonely and neglected and desperate for someone to see you as more than just a function in their life, but understanding doesn't mean forgiving, and forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. Jack, wait. Good night, Emily. Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a very difficult day for all of us. I closed the door behind me, leaving my wife alone with her guilt and her fears and the envelope full of evidence that would determine what happened next. But I wasn't done yet. Monica was still out there, still thinking she could control the situation, still believing that she held all the cards. In the morning, I would show her exactly how wrong she was. I set my alarm for 5:30 and tried to sleep, but my mind kept racing through the conversations of the evening. Emily's tears had been real, and so had her pain. Maybe if we'd had this conversation 6 months ago, things might have been different. But we hadn't, and they weren't. And now all that was left was to finish what everyone else had started. At exactly 7 a.m., I knocked on Monica's office door. She opened it with a smile that was equal parts predatory and amused. Jack, you're punctual. I like that in a man. Monica. I walked past her into the office, noting that she'd dressed for battle in a black suit that was both professional and intimidating. We need to discuss the future. Whose future? Yours, mine, or Emily's? I set the manila envelope on her desk and took the chair across from her. All of the above. Monica picked up the envelope and examined its contents with the same clinical detachment she'd shown everything else. The photographs, the financial records, the timeline of Emily's affair, all of it laid out in devastating detail. Very thorough, she said finally. David Park's work, I assume? You know David? I know everyone worth knowing in this city, Jack. The question is, what do you plan to do with all this evidence? I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. That depends on you. On me? You've been playing games with my marriage, Monica, using my wife's affair as leverage, thinking you could control both of us by controlling information. That ends now. Monica set the photographs aside and poured herself coffee from the machine in the corner of her office. And if I refuse to end it, then I'll make sure the executive board knows exactly how you've been managing your department, the affairs you've encouraged, the lies you've covered up, the way you've been using personal information to manipulate employees. You think they'll care? I think they'll care when it becomes a lawsuit. When Emily's affair becomes public knowledge and she claims she was coerced into it by a supervisor who threatened her career advancement. When Ethan Cross decides to protect himself by revealing how many other married women you've introduced him to over the years. For the first time since I'd known her, Monica looked genuinely surprised. You'd destroy Emily's career to get to me? I'd give Emily the chance to take control of her own story before you use it to destroy both of us. Monica was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she smiled. Not the predatory expression I'd grown used to, but something that might have been genuine respect. You know, Jack, I think I underestimated you. Most people do. It's one of my greatest advantages. So what do you want? I stood up, straightening my tie. I want you to transfer Emily to the Portland office, effective immediately. I want her affair with Ethan Cross to become ancient history that no one discusses. And I want you to remember that trying to manipulate me was the biggest mistake you've made in your very successful career. And in return? In return, your role in facilitating Emily's affair remains between us. Your career continues on its current trajectory. And you never again make the mistake of thinking you can use my personal life as a weapon against me. Monica extended her hand across the desk. Deal. I shook it, noting the firm grip and the calculating look in her eyes. Monica would honor our agreement because it was in her best interest to do so, but she'd also remember this conversation for a very long time. One more thing, I said, heading toward the door. Emily doesn't know about this conversation. As far as she's concerned, the transfer to Portland is a promotion that you arranged to help her career. Protecting her? Giving her a chance to start over. Whether she takes it or not is up to her. I left Monica's office and took the elevator down to the parking garage where Emily was waiting by my car. She looked like she hadn't slept, her eyes red-rimmed and her hands shaking slightly. How did it go? She asked. You're being transferred to Portland, effective next Monday. Monica says it's a promotion, a chance to run your own team. Emily stared at me in shock. Portland? Jack, what did you do? I gave you a way out, a chance to start over somewhere that the mistakes of the past few months won't follow you. And us? What happens to us? I looked at my wife, really looked at her, for what I knew might be the last time. She was still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with 10 years ago, but she was also a stranger who'd lied to my face for months, who'd chosen another man's bed over our marriage. I don't know, Emily. I honestly don't know. She started to cry then, not the careful tears of someone trying to manipulate a situation, but the raw, ugly sobs of someone who'd finally understood what they'd lost. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Jack. I know you are. But sorry doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't change what happens next. I got in my car and drove away, leaving Emily standing in the parking garage with her tears and her regrets and her new life waiting for her in Portland. It was over. The affair, the lies, the manipulation, all of it was finished. Emily would start over in a new city, Monica would remember not to underestimate me, and Ethan Cross would find some new married woman to charm and abandon. And me? I would go back to my empty penthouse and my expensive scotch and the life I'd built from nothing but ambition and determination. I'd won. I'd outmaneuvered everyone who'd tried to make a fool of me, and I'd done it without violence or scandal or any of the dramatic gestures that weaker men might have chosen. So why did victory feel so much like loss? I drove through the Seattle streets, past the art gallery where Ethan was probably nursing his wounded pride, past the restaurant where Emily had fallen in love with someone else, past all the places where my marriage had slowly died while I was too busy succeeding to notice. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. How did it go? I typed back. It's finished. All of it. Are you okay? I thought about that question as I pulled into my building's parking garage. Was I okay? I'd systematically destroyed everyone who'd betrayed me, protected my reputation and my career, and emerged from the wreckage of my marriage with my dignity intact. I was exactly where I'd planned to be when this all started, so why did I feel like I'd lost everything that mattered? I rode the elevator up to the penthouse and walked to the window where this had all begun, where I'd stood 3 days ago watching Emily laugh at someone else's messages. The city spread out below me, full of lights and possibilities, and people who were probably making the same mistakes Emily and I had made. I poured myself a scotch and raised it in a toast to the empty apartment. To victory, I said aloud, and to the price of being right. The scotch burned going down, but not as much as the knowledge that I'd won a war and lost everything I'd been fighting for.